Now we're going to have a look at ingesting an external RSS feed into our Adobe Air application and using a list collection to populate a feathers list with that data. We'll also use a feathers web view to display that data, that HTML URL that's ingested, for each item that's selected from the list. So in order to do that, there's a couple things we need. We need to import the feathers list control, the feathers web view control, the feathers list collection data, and also a number of things from the core Flash libraries. So one of those things is the flash.events.event class. We also need URL loader and URL request. So to do this, what we'll do is go down here, and in our declarations we're going to render our list as feed list, our list collection as feed list collection, our web view as web, an XML loader, or rather a URL loader as XML loader, and an XML object as feed data. So these are all going to be used to ingest our feed and display it in somehow. So aside from build container and build components, which basically sets up all our UI elements, including the list, inside of build components, we're also going to invoke, after all that is completed, something called gather feed data. So if we scroll down, gather feed data will create a new URL loader called XML loader, and then we're going to add a listener to that, and that's going to be of starling.events.event.complete, and that'll tell us if the feed has loaded or not. So once that feed is loaded, we're going to invoke the feed loaded function. We'll also go through and invoke load and pass in a new URL request with the URL of our RSS feed. So once that actually gets loaded, what will happen is, and actually this should be flash.events.event.complete here to match up with what's coming up down here. Basically, what we're doing here is we have to specify the full declarative package, because there is an event.complete that's on flash.events, and there's also an event class with Starling events. So depending on what we're doing, we need to specify with great specificity exactly which event class we want to use in which package. So that's why we're declaring the full package name here along with our class, depending upon what we're doing. So here, since we're just using some Flash core components, we're invoking flash.events.event complete. So we load that in, feed loaded gets fired when it comes in, and there we set feed data to a new XML object, and we populate that XML object with the data that comes in through our event target, which is our XML loader. So that's basically just a big string of data. It's just the XML data. It's plain text. What happens is, because we declare it as an XML object, when we pass it in there, when we instantiate this object, it becomes XML data because it is valid XML data. If it was invalid, it would have a problem, but because it's valid, it's fine here. We then create a new list collection for feathers called feed list collection, and this is what populates our actual feathers list. The next thing we do is we loop over all the items in our feed. So for each feed item, which is of type XML, and we're looking within feed data, which is the XML data we just created off of that string that came back, channel, item. So we're looking at all the items inside of our feed. For each item, we push it into the feed list collection. And we don't push the raw item, but we create an object in ActionScript, and we push that in. We can add whatever type of data we want on here. So I create a title attribute here, and I pass in my feed item title, and a link attribute, and passed in feed item link, because that's really all we need in our list. We then set the feed list data provider to that feed list collection we just created. And we also set its item render properties label field to title. And title is what's being defined right here. And then we simply add an event listener of type starling.events.event.change. And that happens whenever we click on a new list item. And when we do that, we declare load articles. We invoke that function, and that's right down here. So that is an event of type starling.events.event. And here we say web load URL feed list selected item link. So whatever item is selected in our feed list, there's a link attribute. We want to load that into a web. Web is actually declared right up here in our build components, right under feed list, where we just create a new web view. We set its width and height, Y position, and so forth, and we just add it to the display. So what this looks like when it runs is this. We'll go into our feed view, and we can see that the feed loads up here just fine. And if we click on any of these items, it's going to fire off that event, pulling in the actual article into this web view, and then we're able to look at it. And that's pretty much it. So a nice little RSS feeder inside of Starling and Feathers using Adobe Air.